Shakka, we've missed you. Yeah, what's going on, part of people, the place to be? I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Hope everybody's doing good. You know, this weird limbo moment between, Christmas and New Year's, being stuck between two pagan holidays, you know what I mean? Very interesting.
But the intercalary days, man. I don't want to give it spill the beans, but we're in some epigomenal days right now.
What is he talking about? We shall find out. But of course, the person by my side here is one half of the EPMD of urban apologetics. One wrecks, the other destroys. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. True ID himself, Adam Coleman. What's going on, sir?
Hey, man, I'm chilling, bro. You doing all right, man?
Man, I was doing really good. I was chilling. I thought I was done doing videos until, January, But we got a late Christmas treat, didn't we?
we did, man. It was unexpected.
It was very
unexpected, bro.
What are we talking about, Adam? Talk to the people.
So the brother, Shakka Ahmose drops another video. We waiting for a while, man, to see what he's gonna come up with, man. And he drops another a video dealing with December 25th of all things. You know what I'm saying? December 25th and the birthday of Horus, winter solstice, the whole nine. So, it was a late Christmas gift, but, we were definitely appreciative for it. Give us something to talk about, in addition to all the other kind of stuff that we covered. But yeah, man. So, got us back here one more again, bro.
No doubt. MJ Jackson with the shout out. Thank you, sir. Of course, let me say what's up to the people in the chat. We got Dean Yu, we got King Charles. We got the real American, Mr. Phil Fox. We got my man CMB.
Phil Fox.
We got Richard Redeem. We got my man Rome in the building, Isaiah Braxton, Carl Anthony. Of course, we got Shotty Mills. You know what I mean? We got Theosis Redneck, who I actually agree with. Jesus was born September 11th, 3 BC. Well, I don't know about the 3 BC part, though. But according to, BC, 3 BC? Yeah, no, 3 BC, I would agree with that. According to astro prophecy and revelation and modern astronomy's capacity to utilize retro projection of night sky thousands. Yeah, so I see you read Heiser too. So, no, but I do agree with this.
Oh, Heiser, right.
Yeah, he's a Heiser, right. So shout out to you, man. And of course, we got, Michelle Turner, you know what I mean? So who is actually first. You actually beat Nate 2D2. That's rare.
That's amazing.
That is rare.
Right there. Yeah.
He must be like having the time of his life. He's on vacation somewhere or something for that to happen.
Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, so the news being messy in the chat.
Yeah, I was wondering if you was gonna read that or not. I wasn't sure.
I mean, woo.
Oh man. You're not gonna talk about him, bro? Why are you scared, man?
It's not that I'm scared. It's just it's been done so well by others that I would just muddy the waters. You know what I mean? So, shout out to Abu
the Candy Man. If you say his name too many times, he's gonna show up in the chat.
Shout out to Abu and Faithful the Guy. Amazing forensic work there.
Shout out to she Richard Katz.
Oh man, but Michelle Turner is correct. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend that it's him again. And yeah, man, it's good times. So yeah, so Shakka, it's been a while since we heard from Shakka, and we like having fun with Shakka because Shakka has a little fun with us, and it's cool. Yeah, it's all love.
Right.
It is all love. There's no beef. Me and him come from the same projects. Go on this project. GP Rock stand up. You know what I mean? So
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. We come from the same PJ. So
practically family then, yeah.
Well, easy. But but no, I would love to sit down and chop it up with Shakka. I think he'd be fun to hang out with, honestly.
I mean, that's the thing is like on this one is actually, I mean, what interested me in this video is I don't think that, and I could be wrong about this, but I think less or I'll say fewer people seem to be kind of still pushing the December 25th thing.
Right.
Because this is a argument or association between Jesus and Horus has been beat to death several times. So I was actually a bit surprised and didn't think that there would really be occasion to deal with this once again this year. But lo and behold, here's another opportunity. So in so much as this is just a common argument,
right,
or has been a common argument, I figure like this gives us the opportunity to deal with it. So,
but Shakka actually adds a brand new wrinkle to this argument, which is very interesting that we're going to see. Mm-hmm. So he is a little creative but it's still the same old zeitgeist tired talking point. But he does try to revive it a little bit. He puts a little spin to it. So he's creative.
Zeitgeist 2.0.
But we will be dealing with that. So I guess we should just get into the video.
Yeah, sounds good to me, bro. Yeah,
all right,
give it up. And we will see what we can see.
So even though the entire video is almost 2 hours long, he doesn't really get into the subject matter until like 1 hour and 38 minutes. So there's not a lot that we have to look at, which is
it's about 10 minutes of content. Of him actually making the point that he's trying to make, and I think that the rest of it was just responding to people in this chat room or something like that.
Right.
So, yep. Should I push play or?
Yeah.
All right. Let me make sure my volume's all the way up. Give me 1 second.
Put my headphones up. Put my microphone up.
There we go. All right. Cool. All right. Here we go.
All right. I have reached the end. I like that. Why do the other channels keep doing religious debates instead of real issues? Oh, that's a good question. Right. All right, cool. So I'm up to speed. I've read all the questions. I'm not answering any more questions. Now I'm just going to speak to what I brought you all here to. I wish this thing had a share screen, because if I could share my screen with you, it would make this much worthwhile. All right. All I'm going to tell you is this. Fuck it. I'll just read it. Okay. That way I can say I did my job. This is from Plutarch in the 1st century CE. Okay. Plutarch said, now mind you, this is Plutarch, the 1st century CE. He said, Isis, when she perceived that she was pregnant, put upon herself an amulet on the 6th day of the month Theophi. And about the time of the winter solstice, she gave birth to Harpocrates, imperfect and premature. That's from Plutarch, Moralia, Isis and Osiris, fragment 65, 378c. Okay? About the time of the winter solstice, she, Isis, gave birth. To who? Harpocrates. Who is Harpocrates? This is from the Ancient History Encyclopedia. The son of Osiris and Isis is known as Horus the child. Harpocrates. That's the Medu Neter name, or the native name. Harpocrates, which became Harpocrates. Okay? The son of Osiris and Isis is known as Horus the child, Harpocrates, who was transformed into the Greek god Harpocrates after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 331 BC. Okay? Now, what that means is that the author is saying that Isis, there was a tradition in the 1st century CE that Isis had given birth to Horus on December 25th. Okay? I'm sleepy, so you have to forgive me. Now, I'm sorry, on this winter solstice, it says she gave birth to Harpocrates or Harpocrates at the winter solstice. That's what Plutarch said. Now I'm going to read from a book called, and you might want to listen to this title because I'm not going to repeat it. The Foundations of Celestial Reckoning. 3 Ancient Chinese Astronomical Systems. Scientific Writing from the Ancient and Medieval World. 1st edition by Christopher Cullen. I'm going to read this to you so you can know. If Plutarch is telling you that Isis gave birth to Horus at the winter solstice, then we need to know when the winter solstice was in BC times.
You can stop it here.
All right.
Now this is from the chapter.
Special shout out to my man Lankus. Thanks for showing the love. Definitely appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Thank you. So,
hey man, let's not forget we have a legend in the building, y'all.
Oh, we have the infamous Richard Katz, PhD, in the building, ladies and gentlemen. They couldn't find him, but we got him right here. BK Apologist. You know what I mean?
Right.
Always giving you the up-to-date, you know what I mean, breaking news. Oh man.
Yeah, man. Let me see.
I'm gonna be put on another list just for that. See that? Thanks, Adam. Oh man, if I'm not in trouble in these streets already. But
oh man. That's tripping.
Man. All right, so let's get to work here. Let me share my screen. If we could just take yours down from I'll do it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, cool.
You got it, yeah.
All right. So this is what he quotes. He quotes from Plutarch.
Oh, see, my man BK with the animations and the slides now. Okay, bro. I see you, dog.
Okay. So anyway, so let's read the quote again. It says, "In this way we shall undertake to deal with the numerous and tiresome people, whether they be such as take pleasure in associating theological problems with the seasonal changes in the surrounding atmosphere." This guy sounds real condescending already, right? Plutarch. Anyway,
yeah.
Or with the growth of the crops and seed times and plowing. And also those who say that Osiris is being buried at the time when the grain is sown and covered in the earth, and that he comes to life and reappears when plants begin to sprout. For this reason, also it is said that Isis, when she perceived that she was pregnant, put upon herself an amulet on the 6th day of the month of Phi, and about the time of the winter solstice, she gave birth to Harpocrates, imperfect and premature amid the early flowers and shoots. For this reason, they bring to him an offering, the first fruits of growing lentils, and the days of his birth they celebrate after the spring equinox. When the people hear these things, they are satisfied with them and believe them, deducing the plausible explanation directly from what is obvious and familiar. This is the same Plutarch, Isis and Osiris, 65. Now, I read a little bit more in the beginning, a little bit more after the quote, so you get more of the context. Now, it is interesting that they also said that they celebrated during the spring equinox. So I don't know.
Right.
That's kind of interesting. But anyway, so, and let's look at the second thing that he quotes. And there's something very interesting about this quote that he kind of actually omits. Right, so he quotes from the Ancient History of Encyclopedia. I went to the website and I found the paragraphs, and of course, I gave you a little bit more before and a little bit after, so you get more of the context. Right, so it says here, the name Horus is the Latin version of the Egyptian Hor, which means the distant one, a reference to his role as a sky god. The elder Horus, brother of Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, is known as Horus the Great in English, or Hawa, or Hororius in Egyptian. The son of Osiris and Isis is known as Horus the Child, Harpocrates, who was transformed into the Greek god Harpocrates after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 331 BCE. Now, here's the line he omits from the quote. Harpocrates also means Horus the Child, but the deity differed from the Egyptian Horus. Harpocrates was the Greek god of silence and confidentiality, the keeper of secrets, whose statutory regularity depicts him as a winged child with his finger to his lips. He completely skipped that line.
Very interesting.
Why would he do that?
I don't know, but actually, as we were talking about this earlier, it is consistent with Roman theology, because they were polytheists, and they honestly didn't really care who you worship as long as you were willing to engraft their beliefs in with it, or merge yours with theirs, and they borrowed from other cultures. That's what Romans did, Greece did as well. Right. So the idea that they've taken Horus the child and reinterpreted him into this other entity, you know what I'm saying, just kind of slapped a Greco Roman face on Horus, and kind of, I guess it's like refurbished Horus the refurbished. You know what I'm saying? That would be like, I mean, that's consistent with what we know about how they got down, theologically. You know what I'm saying? But I think it's very interesting that he doesn't mention this. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they're so intent on trying to prove that that Christianity borrowed from Kemet or whatever, that he just totally skipping over this piece right here.
No, right? Because mind you, this is not part of the quote that he didn't quote. This is within the quote that he speaks. He literally skips this sentence.
Right.
So that's I
thought it was too. I thought it was interesting too. I'm not sure if we got into this part in our where we want to go yet or not. But it's interesting that he mentions in that was it reading Plutarch, where it says that Isis gave birth to, I guess, Harpocrates around the time of the winter solstice.
Right. And we're gonna get into why he puts himself in a quite a spot.
Right.
Even with the very title of his video, he kind of puts himself in a very weird place.
He's made an identity claim.
Yes.
Between there's an identity relation between the winter solstice and December 25th, but already, according to what he's quoted thus far, you're already one step removed from that, because you're just talking about around winter solstice as opposed to a definitive date. But I know we're gonna get back to that.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about
the chat is lit today, man. I don't know if you're paying attention, but
I can't, because I'm looking at the slides. What's going on here?
The chat is lighting it up, man.
Oh man,
look.
You dudes is wilding. Oh man, this is good. All right. So in the same book that Plutarch says this, he also says this about Osiris and Isis. He says, "We must not treat legend as it were history at all, but we should adopt that which is appropriate in each legend in accordance with its verisimilitude." Wow. Now, mind you, he's supposed to be a priest of the Kemetic order. And he's saying, yeah, this wasn't real.
Right.
Right. But let's look more into Plutarch, so we have a better understanding of the person that Shakka quotes from. So in the Handbook of Egyptian Mythology by Geraldine Pinch, it says here, Plutarch was fascinated by Egyptian religion and wrote a book on this topic called Concerning Isis and Osiris. He could not speak or read any form of the Egyptian language. So he had to rely on conversations through interpreters and speculations about Egyptian deities found in the works of earlier classical writers. Plutarch's narrative of the life and death of Osiris and the wanderings of his widow, Isis, is the one commonly used in popular books on Egyptian mythology.
Interesting.
So the guy that carries so much intellectual weight when it comes to ancient Egypt couldn't even read the Metal Netter, which was a script created by the Kemetic priesthood.
That's interesting for at least two reasons. Because number one, it's usually from people from this community. They're always accusing Christians of whitewashing this or whitewashing that. But it sounds like the heavy hitter in terms of what we understand about the wanderings of the widow, Osiris, life and death of Osiris, like Plutarch, this heavy hitter, was a white dude who was adding on his interpretation based up, like it's like secondhand knowledge. He's kind of giving his own.
Oh, it gets worse.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oh, it gets worse about Mr. Plutarch. So let me keep it moving here. Much of Plutarch's Osiris narrative must have been based on stories and customs that were current in Egypt during the 1st century CE. But this does not make it a reliable source for earlier periods. The myth of Osiris had been developing and changing for over 2,500 years before Plutarch was born. But Plutarch's written sources could only take him back 600 years. This is a huge point. I want you to keep that in the back of your brain. His information about ancient Egypt only goes back 600 years. We'll be coming back to that.
Yeah.
Right? So stick that in the back of your head. Plutarch himself gave alternate versions of parts of the story, some of which he thought might be more authentic than others. So here we have a Kemetic priest of the secret order who can't read the script, who has to rely on other interpreters. But then when he has to interpret stuff, he basically starts spitballing.
Right.
He's freestyling now.
Freestyle.
Off the head, off the top.
Right, off the dome.
Put the beat on. You know what I mean?
Right.
So let's continue. And this is still from the Handbook of Egyptian
Well, he was like Nick Cannon, like wilding out. You know what I'm saying? He was on that too. He was wilding out for real.
His stated purpose in writing the book was to seek the universal truths that he believed to lie behind the myths and beliefs of all cultures. He quotes other writers' far-fetched allegorical interpretations of Egyptian myth. His own comments on the nature of myth often sound surprisingly modern. He did not believe that myths describe events that actually happen. So here we have a Kemetic priest who can't read the metal netter, who has a limited knowledge of ancient Egypt, and what little knowledge he has doesn't believe it's even true.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now this is from a paper called De Orisite, which is of course Isis and Osiris,
Right.
by Scott Muncrief, the Journal of Hellenic Studies, volume 29. So let's see what he has to say about this particular treatise, this book. This is what he says about Plutarch's Isis and Osiris. It need hardly to be said that all this is not in the least Egyptian. Yet it is interesting to note how throughout the treatise, Plutarch seems thoroughly to believe that his ideas are the same as those held by the educated Egyptian priesthood, and that he, in common with them, is possessed of an esoteric gnosis about the Egyptian deities. The vulgar might indulge in the gross forms of superstition derided by Greeks and Romans alike, but for those initiated into the mysteries of Isis, there was the doctrine on which he dilates in his treatise, of which the polytheism and worship of animals is only the outer form. Right? So he doesn't believe that these gods are actually gods, that these are other principles, right? Well, again, watch this. Again, with Plutarch, as with all foreigners, the animal gods of Egypt were a sore stumbling block, and he is fain to pass them off as mere symbols or as utilitarian interpretations. All right, get it.
No, well, actually, that just kind of adds even more to what I was going to say, as a matter of fact, because when you're dealing with the spiritual systems of Kemet, I'm saying dealing with Plutarch as well, there's always seems to be this hierarchy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really the religion and the deeper aspects of their spirituality, if you will. There's like this elitism. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm saying you have this elitism. You know what I'm saying, where the pharaohs get up, all this kind of stuff, and the aristocracy, they have access to the afterlife and all this kind of stuff. But for these weren't worldviews for the common man, right? You know what I'm saying? Right. That's not what this was. And even Plutarch, and he believed he was thinking along the same lines as the Egyptian priests. He was of the perspective that the stuff that they were practicing, the common man was practicing, was like gutter level spirituality. Like it wasn't even the real deal. It was just like the surface. You know what I mean? I just find that very interesting that you have this elitist mentality that seems to pervade so much of the Kemetic practitioners in terms of how they approach these things. I think that's pretty fascinating. And
we're definitely going to tackle the date situation. But when I started researching Plutarch, I knew of Plutarch, but I never really digged in.
Yeah.
And as I'm reading the commentary of these peer-reviewed articles and hearing how he speaks, I'm like, this sounds very familiar. A lot of us who deal with people in the conscious community, we would hear them say, well, the ancient Egyptians never believed in gods. They believed that there were principles. Right? The nature is really nature. Right? And in my mind, I'm like, how like, why are all you saying this? Like, how do you know that this is what these ancient people believe? Well, come to find out, they wasn't listening to the ancient commissions. They're listening to Plutarch.
Yeah.
A dude that couldn't read the hieroglyphics.
Plutarch is the man behind the curtain, right?
Yeah. This white man who's hitting you with the Platonist remix of what he believes is ancient Egyptian religion.
Right.
And to continue this particular paragraph, right? So let me start again. It says, again, with Plutarch, as with all foreigners, the animal gods were a sore stumbling block, and he is fain to pass them off as mere symbols, right? We hear a lot of, he sounds like the dudes on 125th in Harlem. It's like, nah, fam, you don't understand. It's really, it's the principles of science, high science, it's quantum physics.
I mean, you can hear the echoes of that, and I'm not. It's not even a diss, but just in terms of how like a brother Jabari would explain their views, or brother Reggie, like brother Reggie puts everything seems like quantum physics, and so it's the same. They seem to be inheritance of Plutarch in that regard.
Yes,
right.
This white Greco Roman who fancied himself as an Egyptian priest.
But you know what's crazy though about that? Like, I mean, just imagine, let's say, for example, you had a white Christian, you know what I'm saying, coming into a predominantly black setting and kind of having the attitude of like, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. I know what the real deal is, and kind of like looking down on the black people that are practicing with Christianity. There's no way that these dudes would ride with that. They would take every opportunity to point that out and say, oh yeah, see, that's what Christianity is about. See, white supremacy and blah, 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 blah. But this is exactly what you have going on with Plutarch, in Kemet. You know what I'm saying? You have this foreigner, this white foreigner coming into, black spaces, if you will, and telling black folk that y'all ain't doing it right. And I'm gonna take your religion and do it the right way.
Actually, he says it's gross. It's
gross, right? You know, like, I mean, come on, fam. Like this, like how do y'all ride with it? Like that's y'all man's? I mean, seriously, who is this? But I would say it's just so crazy to me, man. It's crazy.
Right. Let me continue the quote here. So, as a matter of fact, the Egyptians worshipped their animal deities without assigning any fanciful reason for doing so, as they had always worshipped them from the time they were the local gnome totems in the pre-dynastic period. The fact that in one district the crocodile was venerated, that in another it was hated and hunted, that in one town sheep were eaten and in another considered sacred, and that the people of Oxyrhynchus, who were fish worshippers, descended one day on the people of Arsenopoulos, who were having a fish dinner and sacrificed and ate all the latter's dogs, therefore causing a riot, which led to a rough usage on the part of the Roman garrison that not seem the Egyptians extraordinary or illogical in the least. So what Scott here is saying is Plutarch saying that these guys didn't really believe this stuff. It's like, word? So why was it when the guys who worship fish, when they found out in the next town they were having a fish dinner, came through and started, set tripping?
Set tripping, right.
You know what I mean? Fish gang. You know what I mean? Coming through.
Fish gang.
You know what I mean? It's like the cops had to be called. The Roman garrison.
But see, here's the thing that was crazy is, and I'm actually working on I'm doing one of my Music Mondays where I'm gonna start break down some lyrics to somebody spitting or whatever, and kind of from an apologetic standpoint. And I'm actually looking at doing breaking down a battle between this dude named B. Dot and Loso. Anyway, one of the things that B. Dot said in there, he's the comedic type. He talks about that it's Christians, or excuse me, the Romans and Greeks were the first ones to impose their beliefs. He kind of starts out with that, you know what I mean? But I think that's interesting because here you see an example that's clearly not the case. So here you have Egyptians. You have an example of them imposing their beliefs amongst one another. And you and I have covered this before, like when it comes to Akhenaten, you know what I mean? And kind of how they did his legacy and stuff like that after he was gone. I mean, like, this is something like these cats, they took this stuff seriously to the extent that they wanted to go eat people's dogs to prove a point. You know what I'm saying? Like they were not playing. And I wonder, actually, I'd be interested too, because I got to read this again. But as far as eating their dogs, I wonder what those dogs represented to the people.
That's what I'm saying. You're gonna disrespect our God, we're gonna disrespect yours probably.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Exactly.
Yeah,
they was on another level, man.
So but watch this now. It keeps going. But Greeks and Egyptians, or Egypto-Greeks, brought up under Hellenic influence, desired, like Plutarch himself, to steer a middle course between atheism and superstition, where the grosser side of Egyptian religion was dropped or treated symbolically, while Osiris, Isis, Anubis, and one or two other deities were picked out and declared not only to be Egyptian equivalents to some of the greater dwellers on Olympus, but in accordance with Platonic feeling of the time, to be world spirits carrying out the bidding of the Logos.
Wow. Now that's very interesting. I mean, I know we don't want to spend a lot of time here, but actually, this is my first time really reading that quote, and I think that's interesting because it is the case that Platonism was kind of like a push against like kind of your just kind of bare knuckle polytheism. I think that's very interesting. That it seems then that this Platonism is starting to pervade Egyptian culture, at least among I'm guessing maybe some of the elites or people who are trying to be, like the up and coming the Joneses or whatever. I think that's very interesting. I'm about to go back and study this some more. That's my first time seeing that. But it actually now it makes me think about what Dr. Vince Bantu was dealing with in his debate with Brother Jabari. Because remember, he talked about how you have this whitewashing of Kemetic spirituality and so forth. And it seems like we're kind of getting to some of the meat and bones here, what that really looked like. You know what I'm saying?
Right. But again, this sounds like the dudes that, let's keep it 100. The people that we see on Sonnet's couch, when they talk about Kemetic spirituality, this is what they do. They steer a middle course between atheism and superstition. Because they'll tell you they don't believe in God, but they wear all the ancient accoutrements of Egyptian religion. They wear the ankh and they wear the different robes, but they don't believe in God.
Right.
Let me say a name. Ankh-Aket from the Amun-Ra squad.
Oh yeah, I mean he probably proclaims that he's the real black atheist, right?
He's in the middle of atheism and superstition. He doesn't believe in any Abrahamic beliefs.
Right. Yeah, he was speaking.
But he rocked the Ankh,
spookism, and all that kind of stuff.
Pays homage to the ancients, right? But he's not religious though.
Right.
Right.
Or you could say like his own boy, Asar Imhotep. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like Asar, obviously, reference to Osiris. But as I understand it, I don't think that he holds any particular version of theism or belief in God either. I could be wrong about that, but again, it'd be kind of like that gray area that seems to be Plutarch, I guess, would be like a forerunner of what their
Plutarch will be selling crystals on 125th in Harlem. He talks just I should say they talk just like him. He's the ghostwriter.
He's the
ghostwriter for all these conscious dudes, bro.
He's Q Miller. He's Quentin Miller.
He's Quentin Miller of the whole.
Plutarch is Quentin Miller.
Oh man, but let's keep it going, man. Good times. Plutarch, along with other Greeks and Romans, naturally thought this Alexandrian cult to be the real and true Egyptian one. His treatise on Isis and Osiris shows how deeply interested he was in the whole subject, but he never got far enough to see that the cult of Alexandria had diverged very considerably from the old native beliefs. He naturally looked at Egyptian religion through the medium of Alexandrian ideas. To him, the native religion certainly contained the pure ore, but the ore was covered by layers of accretions and superstitions, which barriers of race and language prevented him from penetrating. Wherefore, it was only fit for the uneducated and vulgar.
Wow.
This is how he saw indigenous Egyptian religion.
Wow.
The Alexandrians alone had the key of the true Egyptian faith. This was, of course, a total inversion of the facts.
Wow.
He considered the actual religion of Kemet vulgar and gross.
Uneducated and vulgar.
And uneducated.
Wow. Wow.
And who are the indigenous people of Kemet? What? They were what? Black people?
Right, as far as I know. Yeah. I mean, right. Right.
So these Negroes didn't know what they're talking about. Me and my Alexandrian crew, we know what it is, though.
And it actually is important to note that, I mean, as far as Alexandria, that would have been like a new modern import city, if you will. You know what I'm saying? Like it was established by Alexander, you know what I'm saying, as a port city. It wasn't it doesn't have the pedigree that a Heliopolis would or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So for them to establish themselves as being like the real center of religious intellectual thought in Egypt, I mean, they're just coming in and taking over. Basically, they're just like, look, we running it now.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the captain now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean?
But the reason why we're going through this so much is that, to quote this guy as somebody who has an expert understanding of indigenous Kemetic religion, come to find out, he actually found the ancient Kemetic religion disgusting.
Right.
So.
And he's doing is he's painting what he believes to be a prettier, more intellectual picture of this indigenous religion that he really has no nothing but disdain for, just about, basically.
Right. I think it's the last one for the whole Plutarch. It says the ascetic philosopher of Alexandria, who adopted a shaven crown and white linen robes, was a member of an artificial esoteric society that was called into being by the intermixture of Greek and Egyptian civilization. But it is to Plutarch we owe our knowledge of this society, and his mistakes and misconceptions show us the distance by which it had become separated from its Egyptian original.
Wow.
So it's like big up to Plutarch for being a cornball and whitewashing the true religion of these ancient black people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Crazy, I mean, so now I feel like I got to go comb through these dudes' videos and stuff like that and see, okay, well, and try to identify, well, here's Plutarch. You know what I'm saying? You want to identify Plutarch and the things that they're teaching, because I don't think these cats are aware of that.
No, but I hope that's the case. I would hate to think that they are aware and still use them anyway.
Oh, true, right.
What does that make them then?
Good point. Right.
So, all right, so let's continue. So, all right, so the video, right? So we just wanted to show that it was strange that he would pick Plutarch of all people to establish an ancient Egyptian connection when clearly this man could care less about ancient Egyptian religion. And of course, we found it very odd that he would skip from that encyclopedia quote as well, right? So here's the crux of the matter. And the crux of the matter actually is the title of the video, right? And the title is December 25th, Horus born day equals winter solstice. So he comes across a couple of barriers, right? So if we're talking based on what we know now of how time is, right?
Like
The winter solstice occurs during the hemisphere's winter. In the northern hemisphere, this is the December solstice, usually December 21 or 22. Christmas, as we know, lands on December 25th. Right. To make things a little bit more easier, what he's saying is that 21 equals 25. Right?
This might be one of those formulaic equations that he mentioned last time. This might be.
So this is what it comes up to. He is basically saying 21 is the equivalent of 25. Obviously, it is not, right? So, but he has to now show that the winter solstice is the equivalent of December 25th. Now, he could go to Greco Roman times and look at how they chronologize the winter solstice, but he doesn't do that, and for good reason. And this is why. Because, you know, the Romans definitely did celebrate the winter solstice. But look, I want you to look at the dates. Yeah, you want to say something, bro?
No, I'm just agreeing. Yeah, I mean,
okay. All right, here we go.
Oh, Michelle Turner said the exotic math is back. The exotic math.
Exotic math. All right. So this is from, again, Philip Scaff and Henry Wace, Table of Roman and Macedonian months. The Romans divided a month into three parts. The first of a month, known as the Calids, the middle or Ides of month, as in Beware the Ides of March, from Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, and the space in between them known as nuns. Other dates were referenced as before those 3 points. So the 25th of December would be 8 days before the Calids of January, right? When studying the ancient reference to Saturnalia, right? This is one of those winter solstice festivals, right? A primary source we have is written by the Roman Macrobius, who lived in the 5th century. His work, Saturnalia, provides much of the details of the origin stories of the celebration as well as its customs. Ancient text scholar T.C. Schmidt highlighted this passage from Saturnalia, Book 1, Chapter 10, given the dates of the celebration. Our ancestors restricted the Saturnalia to a single day, the 14th before the Calids of January. But after Gaius Caesar had added 2 days to December, the day on which the festival was held became the 16th before the Calids of January, with the result that, since the exact day was not commonly known, some observing the addition which Caesar had made to the calendar and others following the old usage, the festival came to be regarded as lasting for more days than one. And yet, in fact, among the men of old time, there were some who supposed that the Saturnalia lasted for 7 days, But one can infer then, from all that has been said, that the Saturnalia lasted but one day and was held only on the 14th day before the calendar of January. It was on this day alone that the shout of Lo Saturnalia would be raised in the temple of Saturn at a riotous feast. Now, however, during the celebration of the Saturnalia, this day is allotted to the festival of Philia, although the day was first assigned to Saturn ops in common. This is from T.C. Schmidt, The Dates of Saturnalia. So Saturnalia was a 3-day long feast that began 16 days before January 1st. Their December was 31 days long as is ours. So that places Saturnalia on December 17th. Far too early to be mistaken for December 25th. However, that isn't the end of the story. Macrobius then notes another celebration, Sigiliara, was celebrated after these 3 days. I think that we have now given abundant proof that the festival of the Saturnalia used to be celebrated on only one day, the 14th before the calendar of January, but that it was afterward prolonged to last 3 days. First, in consequence of the days which Caesar added to the month of December, and then in pursuance of an edict of Augustus, which prescribed a series of 3 days rest for the Saturnalia. The festival, therefore, begins on the 16th day before the calendar of January and ends on the 14th, which used to be the only day of its celebration. However, the addition of the feast of the Saint-Giliara has extended the time of general excitement and religious rejoicing to 7 days. Schmidt, in his article, provided a translation of chapter 10 in its entirety as dates are referenced throughout. He then concludes, Macrobius does an excellent job summarizing authorities that were available to him, most of which I think have been lost. His conclusion is quite clear. Saturnalia originally was 1 day and occurred on the 14th day before the calendar of January. But when Caesar altered the calendar, it extended to 3 days and started on the 16th. Later, a new festival of Sigiliara extended the celebrations to complete 7 days, meaning that the festival ended on either the 10th or 9th day of the calendar of January. Depending on how we count, of course, neither of these days fall on the 8th day before the calendar of January, that is December 25th.
Wow.
So one of the most major festivals of the winter solstice has nothing to do with December 25th.
And you know what? This actually answers some questions I had too, because as we were kind of prepping for this, I was looking at some of the different calendars, and even as it's saying here, like with Julius Caesar, my understanding is that his alteration or of the calendar, or I guess I'll say the alteration that occurred under his reign, you're looking at about 46 BC, but it was quibbled about until Augustus Caesar, who came after him, and it was kind of settled in like 26 AD. Excuse me, BC, rather, 26 BC. That's when they kind of settled on the count. So now this kind of makes sense in terms of what they're saying here, how these days were added, because it is the case that with the Julian calendar and the Augustus calendar, that they're putting in like December 31st, and they're adding in like leap days and stuff like that, right, in order to even out the calendar to make sure that it's staying on track. So this is actually making a lot of sense. Yeah.
So Shakka can't use this to prove a Horus connection with December 25th, because this festival was never celebrated on December 25th. But there is a Greco Roman holiday that actually was celebrated on December 25th. Right. And it's one that a lot of us have heard about recently because of Christmas time, right?
Right.
Dies Natalis Solis Invictus, translated as the birthday of the unconquerable sun. It was celebrated on December 25th, in 354 AD, according to the calendar of Philocalus. Mm-hmm. Right? This is the actual celebration of the birthday of the unconquerable sun, and it was on December 25th. But notice the year, 354 AD. Right?
Right.
All right. So the Sol Invictus cult followers worship the sun. Thomas Talley reports that while Emperor Aurelian did not first introduce Rome to the cult, he popularized it and the celebration day. Previously, local celebrations of Sol revolved around the dedication of the gods' temples in what? August or November. Mm-hmm. In fact, the word natalis could mean more than simply birthday, but it may also be used for the concept of an anniversary, as Roger Peirce notes in the origins of the liturgical year. It says, Tally tells us the indigenous sun, quote, at Rome did not seem to have been especially sensitive to the winter solstice or any other quarter days. Okay, so it wasn't a big deal about the winter solstice when it came to worshiping this sun deity.
Right. So
in S.E. Heidremann's Soul, the Sun in the Art and Religions of Rome, he says that there is no evidence that Aurelian instituted a celebration of Sol on that day, December 25th. A feast day for Sol on December 25th is not mentioned until 80 years later in the calendar of 354 and subsequently in 362 by Julian and his oration of King Helios. Remember, keep those dates in your head. 354, 362.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish that first. Go ahead.
All right, so when translating Hippolytus' commentary on Daniel, written probably 202 to 211 AD, Schmidt notes that 5 of the 7 manuscripts contain December 25th as the date for Jesus' birth, and another offers the 25th of either December or March. Go ahead, bro.
No, I just think it's interesting. So, go back to that previous slide again.
Sure.
So Aurelian is kind of like the founder of this
particular festival, not all the festivals dedicated to the sun. This one for this particular temple. Remember, they're already worshiping the sun god in November already.
Right. And so with Sol Invictus, you're not really getting a December 25th, and you said to like 80 years later, right? Which I find interesting because they try to draw a connection between obviously Jesus and Sol Invictus or whatever, but for neither I'll just say belief system, for neither one of them was December 25th in any way significant when they were founded. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we'll get to this later, but obviously for Christianity, December 25th wasn't a thing. And it just seems like for here, your boy Aurelian, it wasn't a thing for him either. So I just think it's very interesting that people are drawing these conclusions on later adaptations or traditions, if you will, rather than going to the source of these worldviews and deriving their views from there.
Right. So again, it's in the calendar 354 and also again 362. But in this commentary of the book of Daniel that mentions Jesus' birth as December 25th, this is dated 202 to 211.
Right.
So this is almost a whole century prior to Sol Invictus. Right. So this is another issue that Shakka has now, because he can't run the Saturnalia in that winter solstice because it's never celebrated in 25th. Now he can't run here because even though it is December 25th, it is a century after the Christians are already celebrating the birth of Christ, December 25th.
Right. So whatever Christians were doing with December 25th, by this point, it was clearly independent of Sol Invictus, because Sol Invictus wasn't an issue as far as December 25th is concerned until over a century later. Right.
So now, since Shakka can't use our current understanding of the winter solstice. He can't use the Greco Roman understanding of winter solstice. So Shakka gets very creative, and that's what we're going to look at right now. So let me put you back up here, and you may continue, sir.
Okay.
Concordance system, page 33 in the book I just named, The Foundations of Celestial Reckoning. It says,
let's rewind that just a little bit.
All right.
It was, however, noted that the calendar then in use after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 31 BC. Okay. Now, what that means is that the author is saying that Isis, there was a tradition in the 1st century CE that Isis had given birth to Horus on December 25th. Okay? I'm sleepy, so you have to forgive me. Now, I'm sorry, on this winter solstice, it says she gave birth to Harpocrates or Harpocrates at the winter solstice. That's what Plutarch said. Now I'm going to read from a book called, and you might want to listen to this title because I'm not going to repeat it. The Foundations of Celestial Reckoning. 3 Ancient Chinese Astronomical Systems. Scientific Writing from the Ancient and Medieval World. First edition by Christopher Cullen. I'm going to read this to you so you can know if Plutarch is telling you that Isis gave birth to Horus at the winter solstice, then we need to know when the winter solstice was in BC times. Okay? Now this is from the chapter, The Triple Concordance System, page 33 in the book I just named, The Foundations of Celestial Reckoning. It says, it was, however, noted that the calendar then in use predicted that the solstice...
Hey, I'm not trying to be petty, man, but like, yo, your boy is really struggling to read this thing, man. Like, you know, it's great because like as I was listening to kind of prepare, like I was listening to it in my headphones. This is actually my first time actually watching the video. And saying I listened to it, but you know, usually I'm like driving and stuff like that, listening at the same time, kind of making mental notes. The brother is really struggling right now. Like he's about to fall asleep at any moment. I don't know if he's like, I don't know if this is like early stage of COVID-19 he's doing.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Be nice.
I hope not. You know what I mean? It's like
we want Shakka to be healthy, man.
Of course we do. Yeah.
That's terrible, Adam.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it was a joke. I don't wish any harm on the man. I mean, let me just play the video.
Anyway,
I'll never be invited back. Here we go.
Pretty much.
BCE would fall on the first day of the first astronomical month, Azinci, 18 day, which would have suggested that conditions in 105 BCE might be close to those specified. Now, this is a very serious scholarly book, just to let you guys know, all right? What he says to finish off the paragraph is this. As we learn from the content of the emperor's edict, at the time of the reform, it was taken that the winter solstice and conjunction of the sun and moon coincided at the start of a day corresponding to December 25th, 105 BCE, which was a Giazi, first day, the normal conditions at a system origin. So there you have Chinese astronomy telling you that, guys, if you want to show me some love, please don't donate the money here because I will never get it. Just go to my Cash App. It's the very first thing in the chat. Just scroll all the way up to the top of the chat. You will see it. $ Shakka Ahmose. That's it, right? But I appreciate you. So what I wanted to show you was that in using records of ancient Chinese astronomy, we know that in late BC times, roughly right before the beginning of the Christian era, that the birthday of Horus as Harpocrates was being celebrated on December 25th. That's what the documentation says. That's not YouTube bullshit, even though I'm speaking on YouTube. It's not social media gossip. That's what it says in the text. Okay?
You can stop it here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, to recap what he said. Right? He says, that's what Plutarch said. Now I'm going to read from a book called, you might want to listen to this title because I'm not going to repeat it. The Foundations of Celestial Reckoning, 3 Ancient Chinese Astronomical Systems, Scientific Writing from the Ancient Medieval World, first edition by Christopher Coleman. I'm going to read this to you so you can know if Plutarch is telling you that Isis gave birth to Horus at the winter solstice, then we need to know when the winter solstice was in BC times. So I want you to notice what he's doing here. He knows he can't prove his point by the current standing of calendars because Christmas is December 25th, winter solstice December 21. And as we all know, 25 doesn't equal 21. Right. He can't use the Greco Roman calendars during the times of Plutarch because when they dealt with the winter solstice, it was never December 25th. And the one holiday that did land on December 25th was only celebrated about 100 years after the fact that Christians were celebrating Jesus on December 25th. So now, for him to try to prove his point, he's going to have to go further back in time to try to find a winter solstice that fits his narrative. And to do so, and kudos to him, he gets creative. He mentions this book, because again, he says that we need to know when the winter solstice was in BC times. And it is a scholarly book because, I have the book. So, so let's quote what he just said from this book, right? It's The Foundations of Celestial Reckoning, 3 Ancient Chinese Astronomical Systems by Christopher Cullen. It says, it was, however, noted that the calendar that in use predicted that the solstice of late 113 BCE would fall on the first day of the first astronomical month, a Xinji 18th day, which would have suggested that conditions in 105 BCE might be close to those specified. As we learn from the content of the emperor's edict at the time of the reform, it was taken that winter solstice in conjunction of sun and moon coincided at the start of a day corresponding to December 25th, 105 BCE, which was a Jizazi, one day, the normal conditions at system origin, right? So that's what the book says, right? Because they're trying to figure out the actual first winter solstice when everything, first was in position, right?
Right.
Now here's the thing. The book keeps going, right?
Okay.
And and this is what he said. He said, I want you to show this, that I'm using records of ancient Chinese astronomy. We know that in late BC times, roughly right before the beginning of the Christian era, that the birthday of Horus as Harpocrates was being celebrated on December 25th. So he's using ancient Chinese astronomy to prove the birth of a committed god.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really needs to be emphasized, man. To understand what kind of leap is being made here. You know what I'm saying? Now, it's not to say that, information about Chinese astrology is invaluable or whatever. And it's not even to say that, say what is observable in the stars in one region of the world may not inform what other people may not have seen in a slightly different region. That's not even the issue there. It's just that at the same time, what you have going on in China, you have going on in Egypt, in the Roman Empire, in that these different people groups are trying to make sense of the calendar, and they're making adjustments, right? But those adjustments don't necessarily coincide with one another. You know what I'm saying? What's going on in China in terms of the adjustments they're making is totally independent of what's going on with, say, the Julian calendar or the calendar with Augustus that you discussed before. So this is so he's just bypassing what's going on locally, if you will, to import what's going on from somewhere else. So the question we need to ask is, why should we privilege what's going on in China with their astronomy over and above how we should understand what's happening in Rome and in those spaces in Egypt, if you will?
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about why the triple concordance system was even created to begin with, right? Because I have the book. So the triple concordance system, what?
So you got firsthand knowledge here, not just
I actually have the right. So the triple concordance system as we have it today was the work of Liu Xing. As a youth, he was a friend of Wang Mang, who rose to power in the Han court through his family connections with the empress. In 9 CE, after having been effective ruler for some years, Wang caused the boy who held the throne as nominal Han sovereign to go through a ceremony of abdication in his favor and took the throne as emperor, with the title Jin, new for his dynasty. Liu Xing became one of Wang's chief ministers and provided intellectual support for his claim to be patterning his government on the model of antiquity and to by drawing power from the fundamental cycles of the cosmos. Liu Xing's construction of a new astronomical support system was part of that support. So his man now is king, and they want to solidify that even though he's new, what he does and how he practices his governance actually comes from antiquity. And to prove that, he actually creates the triple concordance system to show that what he's been doing has been done. So to ground his regency with antiquity, he creates this system.
Right now, this is very interesting. Now, and actually, I hadn't really thought about this till just now. So, I know you're going to talk about chronology versus theology later, but what we're saying here is kind of astronomy with political motivations,
serious political overtones.
So this is not about mythology. This is not about religion. This is politics. Not about none of that.
It's politics.
This is about politics. It's not even about astronomy for real. It's only in so much as the astronomy.
It's under the guise of astronomy.
It's under the guise of astronomy, but the agenda is political. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, go ahead.
All right, so that's the reason why this system was created. But anyway, let's keep reading from this book. System origin. As already indicated, if we only want to make calculations about the sun and moon, including such phenomena as solstices, equinoxes, conjunctions of the sun and moon, and thus the first days of lunar months and lunar eclipses, we may use the day the system was inaugurated, when it was assumed that winter solstice and conjunction of sun and moon coincided at midnight, beginning the first day of the first celestial month, which was also a Jazzy one day on December 25th, 105 BCE in the proleptic Julian calendar. Now, proleptic, a calendar obtained by extension earlier in time than its invention or implementation, is called proleptic version of the calendar. So to even make a correspondence with the Julian calendar, you couldn't use the actual Julian calendar. You had to recon the Julian calendar to try to make some sort of connection.
Right, you had to hop in the DeLorean.
Basically.
Right.
Basically. So again, right, there's problematics here with the synchronization, that Shakka wants to do. But it gets worse for him.
Whoa, does it? Wow.
Yeah. Because in the book that he quoted, however, the triple concordance system specification frequently talks about counting off years from a much more distant point. The Shenyang high origin, without unfortunately saying exactly where that point is. For that information, we have to look at another piece of Lo Xing's writing preserved in the Hansu, his Sajing canon of the ages. At one point, this tells us in the Han system, the first year of the Han grand inception reign period was distant from high origin by 143,127 years. Okay. So counting back 143,127 years from winter solstice of 105 BCE, we find ourselves at the winter solstice calculated according to the triple concordance as falling on December 2nd.
Wow.
143, 232 BCE. And why is that a big deal for them? Well, now since 143,127 equals 32 times 4617, i.e. a whole number of origin periods, and the unisolar conditions at this high origin would have been taken to be exactly identical to those at the winter solstice at 105 BCE. So what was the purpose of using such a distant starting point for calculations? I'm glad you asked. The aim, as we shall see when we come to look at the parts of the triple concordance dealing with the planets, was to find a moment in the past that not only saw the sun and moon at their initial positions, but did the same for the 5 visible planets. For these, the recognized initial conditions were that they were all taken to be in conjunction with one another at a standard distance to the west of the sun, so that in theory, they had just become visible at dawn, which they certainly were not in late 105 BCE. Given the length and incommensurabilities of the planetary cycles, it was necessary to look far back in the past to find such a moment that led to acceptably accurate predictions of planetary positions during the time the triple concordance was in use, while also being suitable for predictions of lunar solar conditions. So we start at 105, right? And yes, that winter solstice lands on December 25th, but they had to go further back if they really want to get the initial winter solstice, because they believe that the initial winter solstice would show the original positioning of the sun, moon, and the 5 visible planets. But that's what they were trying to go for.
They're trying to,
That was the idea. And when they did the calculations, the winter solstice, December 2nd.
Wow.
not December 25th.
Wow.
So, anything you want to say about that?
Nah, man. I mean, I got nothing. I got nothing.
All right. So before we get into this, actually, let me. So do we need to play more of the video, or do we keep going? What do we do?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. Let me see.
Yeah, all right, let me
more minutes. Yeah, it's like 4 minutes. Like,
all right, let's play the rest.
All right. Okay. Okay, cool.
So there you have it. It was taken at the winter solstice, and conjunction of the sun and moon coincided at the start of a day corresponding to December 25th, 105 BC. That's from the foundation of celestial reckoning, dealing with ancient astronomy. And then back to Plutarch. Isis, when she perceived that she was pregnant, about the time of the winter solstice, she gave birth to Harpocrates. So what did that mean? At the end of the day, it simply means this. The winter solstice, 105 BCE, equals December 125th. And what that means is that in the 1st century CE, an extant tradition of Horus being born on December 25th was in effect. And that's right at the time when Jesus was supposed to have lived. Sorry, that's what the facts say. If I could show it to you, it will probably impact you much more in a much more dynamic way. But again, I can't share my screen with this. If so, I don't know how. Maybe one of you know how. You could tell me how. But yeah. Okay. Right. Okay, so I fulfilled my obligation. As you can see in my eyes, I'm very tired. I'd like to recommend to you all, go to my website so you can see what's going on with me.
Okay.
Going on with me.
Enough of that.
Yeah, enough of that. Yeah.
All right, so this is where we at. Shakka makes this claim of this equivalence of the birth of Horus,
right,
with December 25th, with the winter solstice.
Right.
If he goes by the modern understanding of that, he runs into a brick wall because, again, 25 does not equal 21. Right. If he tries to use the Greco Roman period calendars to prove his point, he can't because Saturnalia is never celebrated on the 25th. And so in Viticus, though it is celebrated 25th, it's celebrated a century after the fact that the Christians already deemed Jesus born December 25th. Mm-hmm. Another brick wall. Yeah. So much so, he now runs to ancient Chinese calendar systems. But unfortunately, I don't know if he didn't read the whole book, whatever. It's still not December 25th because according to that calendar, it's December 2nd. But the elephant in the room is, since we know Shakka represents all things Kemet, and we're talking about a Kemetic deity, right, why doesn't he go and prove his point with ancient Kemetic calendars? Well, there's a reason why he doesn't do that. And actually, Adam actually put me onto something that I didn't know. So I'm going to let Adam talk about that a little bit real quick.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, and then we'll get to the slides. But just real briefly, actually, I was interviewing, what's the brother's name? The rapper guy for... Now I messed up. Now I can't remember what the dude's name is. You know. Anyway, I was interviewing a rapper on the King Talks podcast. David Banner, that's what it was. I was interviewing David Banner, and we got into a back and forth about he kind of bringing the same thing like Horus and Jesus, December 25th, and blah 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 blah. And in the following show, I broke down how really, if you go back, you're going back to, if you really want to go back to Kemet, then you got to talk about Horus being celebrated on one of what's called the epigomenal days. So what you have, and you can get into this in the slides, but in ancient Kemet, in their calendar system, you have different calendars. You got the lunar calendar and the civil calendar, but essentially the way they had their days arranged, you had a series of months, and then you had 5 days in between the years. I'm saying, so you have the end of year one, for example, And before the beginning of year 2, in our example here, there's 5 days in between there. And what they would do is they would take those 5 days to celebrate the birth of the gods. And so on the first day, you celebrate Osiris. Day 2 of that, you're celebrating Horus. And then you also celebrated Isis, Nephthys, and I feel like I'm leaving one out. But, they would celebrate, those were considered to be the birthdays of the gods. That's what they would celebrate them. You know what I mean? And at the same time, it was understood that during these 5 days, kind of like all of reality kind of hangs in the balance, because they're having to appease Sekhmet in hopes that she won't destroy, the universe during that 5-day period as well, right? So you got all this kind of going on in what's called the intercalary period. It's kind of in between calendar. That's kind of what that means. But it was also called the epigomenal days, which goes back to a Greek word, epigonomoi or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing that. But, in English, it's the epigomenal days. And so my whole point is, if we're going to talk about the birthday of Horus, supposedly, then it's not enough to just camp out at Plutarch. I'm saying you got to go back further and deal with, their origin stories, you know what I'm saying, and talk about the epigomenal, the second of which was celebrated for Horus. Now, at best, and we can come back to this later, at best with Shakka Ahmose, if we're going to steal man's position, at best what he can do is say that his only intention is to prove that the people at the time of Christ were borrowing from a December 25th myth, but that still fails for reasons that we'll get back to in a second.
Right. So let's look a little bit at what Mr. Coleman just spoke about. This is from a study of references to feasts and festivals and non-literary documents from Ramesside period, Del El Medina by Haiti Juhainen. During the period from the last day of the ancient Egyptian civil year, was that 6 Simwa 30, I'm guessing, through the New Year festival on first At 1, the world was in the transitional stage from one year to another. The regular cyclical time of NHH had halted and the world had entered the linear DT time. During this period, the people were threatened by plague caused by Sekhmet, the Eye of Re. It was also Sekhmet who could protect them from this threat. To assure the protection of this particular goddess, a ritual called pacifying Sekhmet, which Adam just alluded to. Mm-hmm. Moreover, protective charms were drawn on linen to be worn around the neck of these perilous days. The 5 eponominal days were called the birthdays of certain Heliopolitan gods. The names of these days were birth of Osiris, birth of Horus, birth of Seth, birth of Isis, and birth of Nephthys. Collectively, these days were called the 5 days upon the year. The epigomenal days were also called the 5 days upon the year. That's an Egyptian word right there. At Del El Medina, abbreviated form of this expression, 5 days. All right. Now, in Shasha Stern's Calendars in Antiquity, we run into a very interesting situation with these 5 days. Although structurally similar to the silver calendar, the Sophic calendar would have differed with regard to the eponomical days, which in most cases were not positioned at the end of the year. In the year of the Eber's calendar, for example, the day of M and H on line 4 coincided with 1 Aket, day 9, thus after an interval of 35 days, because in the civil calendar, 5 eponomical days are inserted between the end of Shemu and the beginning of 1 Akhet. This means that the eponomical days of the solar calendar had to be positioned in this year after the second month, beginning with Dai, as the civil calendar drifted through the centuries. Mm-hmm. The position of this longer 35-day interval, which includes the 5 eponomical days, would have changed. Thus, in a rather complex manner, the position of the eponomical days in the solar calendar would have drifted together with the drift of the civil calendar. Which means that 5-day period in which these gods are celebrated for their births never landed at the same time.
Never did.
So to say that it happened during the winter solstice, it's hard for you to like, well, when did it? I mean, it did eventually, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. And actually, I've been mistaken in how I think in terms of how I've communicated this previously. I've talked about this before, but it never registered to me. Like these are days were kind of from year to year, they were shifting. You know what I'm saying? And that was part of the problem that they were trying to correct by the time that Julius Caesar comes along. They're trying to find a more reliable, static, if you will, calendar. But as far as the Egyptian calendar is concerned, these 5 epagomenal days are shifting and moving over periods of time. You know what I'm saying? So let's say, and I'm just kind of just using this for an example, in year 1, let's say it occurs at the end of the summer, by year 155, it's in, February or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's constantly shifting around. And that was part of the problem that they ran into. Yeah.
Pardon me, Adam. Let me give this guy some attention because he's been wanting attention for a long time for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him some attention right now. So Mithra, Persian god, born 25th December by a virgin 600 years before Jesus. All right. First of all, I'm glad you said Persian god because there's 2 gods, right? The Greco Roman Mithra was actually a very different one than the one in Persia. So that was good that you specify which Mithra. So I'll give you points for that. But no Mithraic scholar will tell you that he was born December 25th. And you're saying by a virgin. Now, in the mythos of Mithra, he's born from a rock.
Right, correct.
So you're going to have to show me how being born from a virgin is the equivalent of being born from a rock. There goes your free time there. I hope you appreciate it. Anyway.
Well, I mean, we go further too. I mean, like, because he's listed 3, and I know you don't want to take too much of it. Zareth, I can't pronounce it. The Iranian guy born on 25th. Krishna, Indian guy born on 25th. I mean, first of all, I think that's pretty, I'm skeptical that all these are that there's primary source documentation for each of these anyway. But let's just say that there is the truth. You know who you don't have primary source evidence of somebody of being born on December 25th? Jesus. Regardless of how many people you want to throw out that were born on December 25th, Jesus Christ at no point in time is affirmed as being born on December 25th in the scriptures, nor does any theological point hang on that whatsoever. And I'm coming back to that later on. So regardless of who, you can throw out 155,000 deities. Doesn't matter. You haven't done your homework, brother.
Now, Yasar, I actually agree with you here. I also believe that he was born sometime during the fall. So we actually have found a point of agreement. That's good.
Okay.
That's good. But anyway, so we see the issues, right, with these calendars, but I needed to know more stuff, right? I'm trying to find stuff, I'm resourcing, and then I realized, wait a minute, I actually know an Egyptologist. So I hollered at my guy, Dr. David Folk, and we had a text exchange, and I asked him if it was okay if I quoted him. He said, sure. So I want you guys to see what we talked about. So I say, question, what corresponding months did the eponomical days in ancient Egypt occur? The birthday of the gods. What is the earliest source for those days? He says the earliest source of those days is the temple calendar of Nusere, Dynasty 5. They are typically the last 5 days of the year, a year here being defined as 365 days. So what month, and I asked him, so what month do the 5 epical days occur in? And he says they don't, right? Now, before we continue, I want you to see that we have the actual calendar. We have fragments of it. This is a tracing, but we have the actual calendar, right? So this is the primary, all right? Now, he said the 5th dynasty. The 5th dynasty reigned from approximately 150 years, from the early 25th century BC until the mid 24th century. Why is that a big deal? Well, if you remember when we talked about Plutarch, his knowledge, now mind you, he was from the 1st century, the Common Era. His knowledge only goes back 600 years. So at best, he's somewhere around here.
That's Plutarch, right? Yeah,
Plutarch. But this calendar is 25th century BC. So he's way before anything that Plutarch might know of. So there's a calendar that he's probably not even aware of until later on that archaeologists, discovered this. So, but anyway, continue my discourse with Dr. Folk. He says, I understand that the Roman calendar did not follow the Egyptian one, but if we are to compare the two, when would those 5 days land on the Julian calendar? He says that's an apples and oranges question. The reason is because the Julian calendar was 365. He actually corrects himself about that in the next text. But while the Egyptian calendar was 360, the 5 additional days of the calendar were dispersed across the civil months. Moreover, the 2 calendars were never in sync because Roman calendars used intercalation. And then he says, oops, I should be the Egyptian calendar used 365 days. too early in the morning for me. Yeah, I texted him earlier that day. So to continue, so I say explain from the previous thing about how these 5 days don't fit. He says the calendar is 12 months of 30 days plus 5 epimonical days. And I say, so the 5 days don't fall on any season then, correct? When you start talking about seasons, things get tricky. The 5 days occur after the end of the 12th month, last month of the season of Shemu, harvest, and before the first day of the first month of the season, Akhet, inundation. The actual seasons could vary because it rotated over the calendar in a 1460-year cycle, which we saw earlier, right? There's a drifting between the silver calendars. So then I say, well, would Horus be considered born during the winter solstice according to the Egyptian calendar? And he says, not really. The Egyptians did not have a winter solstice. As I said, the calendar rotated. So I said, can I quote you for a video I'm working on? Like, I suppose, let's just say for clarity that the Egyptian calendar did not follow the same months or order as the Gregorian calendar. This is why he couldn't go back to Kemet.
Right.
Because he couldn't syncretize because it's not there. There is no winter solstice in their calendars.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not.
The birthday of Horus is shifting and all
drifting. Over.
Right. Shifting and drifting over 1460 years, was it? For it to kind of revolve around. Right. Looking bad for your boy, man.
So there's no way for him to run with this. He couldn't go modern. He couldn't go Greco Roman. He tried to go to China. That backfired. And he didn't even attempt to go to Kemet, which is what his worldview is, which is shocking. Like that'd be the first place you would think he would turn to. But he didn't. Now, I don't know if it's because he did know or didn't. I don't want to put that in his, I don't know his intention, but it is odd that somebody who's very much, part of the Kemetic community who believes in a Kemetic worldview doesn't try to back up his claim with Kemetic chronology.
You would think that he would, right? And now, again, I mean, the best thing he could do, I'm just trying to steelman him here. The best thing he could argue would be to say that, I'm focusing on the first century because that's when Christianity came around. I mean, that's probably the best that he could do. But even then, he's still going to fall flat because you've got this ambiguity. And did you have more slides or should I jump in?
Well, you know what? I do.
Okay.
But you know what? I know you want to do your thing. So
no. I mean, I can because I sum up. Yeah. So if you want to run through the rest of yours first, and then I'll knock mine out, and then
cool.
We'll close out. Yeah.
Cool. So then, but the question is still, okay, we saw this one already. The question is, well, all right, so we know there's no connection, but still, why? Why the Christians chose December 25th? Well, in The Origins of the Liturgical Year by Thomas J. Talley, he says there was a belief within the early church that the date of the death of Jesus would also reflect either his birth or his conception. And we see here Tertullian, he says around 200 CE, Tertullian of Carthage reported the calculations that the 14th of Nisan, the day of the crucifixion according to the Gospel of John, in the year Jesus died was equivalent to March 25th in the Roman solar calendar. March 25th is, of course, 9 months before December 25th. It was later recognized as the Feast of the Annunciation, the commemoration of Jesus' conception. Thus, Jesus was believed to have been conceived and crucified on the same day of the year. Exactly 9 months later, Jesus was born on December 25th. This is from Tertullian at Versus Iodos 8. The idea appears in an anonymous Christian treatise titled On Solstice and Equinoxes, which appears to come from 4th century North Africa. The treatise states, therefore, our Lord was conceived on the 8th of the Calids of April in the month of March 25th, which is the day of the passion of the Lord and of his conception. From on that day he was conceived, and on that same he suffered. Based on this, the treatise dates Jesus' birth to the winter solstice. And this is from Christmas and the Crosshairs, 2,000 years denouncing and defending the world's most celebrated holiday. For whatever reason, the Roman Church chose December 25th as the date on which to celebrate the Nativity. It was a momentous decision that would cause centuries of controversy and conflict. The first problem was that other Christian churches in the empire had settled on another date in which to mark Christmas. January 6th, or Epiphany. The term means manifestation. And the January 6th date celebrated not only the birth of Jesus as his first earthly appearance, but also the arrival of the Magi, the manifestation to the Gentile world, his first miracle at the wedding in Cana, and his baptism. As an adult in the Jordan River, with his divinity was publicly proclaimed from on high. It was true that this date was originally chosen by radically dissident Christian groups such as Basilians and the Marcionites, clearly people not to be listened to, but the official church of the great cities in the East, including Constantinople, Jerusalem, and Antioch, also had established a January tradition, based, it seems, on the calculation of a different date for Easter. From then on, the battle was to persuade Easterners that December 25th was the correct date. So the reason why they chose December 25th was because they were trying to basically triangulate his birth and death. So if he's born or dead a certain day and we go back 9 months, then that must be his birth.
Right. So it sounds like they are trying to draw some sort of, and I think that first reference is like they were drawing some sort of connection between his, well, when I guess he was conceived, and when he was crucified or something like that, but I mean, so actually there's a more fundamental point that I think we need to get to. I'm gonna kind of come back to that in a second.
Yeah,
like I think one thing that is misunderstood among most conscious community people, possibly Shakka as well, is that I don't think that they really grasp like the idea of like sola scriptura, the notion that the Bible is the final authority in terms of faith and practice, right? Because what they do is they make the assumption that if there's this tradition over here, and say there's even like the writings of Tertullian or something like that, there are these things that they can find in the found or the church fathers and theologians and so on and so forth. If they can identify something over there that's problematic, then they've done some assault to Christianity. But what they don't realize is that within the Christian worldview, it's not the case that those traditions are necessarily indicative of Christianity proper, right? I don't have to invest any weight whatsoever in December 25th or any tradition associated with it. I don't have to. I can totally disagree with Tertullian completely. You know what I'm saying? In terms of why he thought it was this, or thought it was that. Like Tertullian is not considered to be, his writings aren't inspired texts.
In fact, other church people did disagree with him.
Of course, right? Other people did, and they had the freedom to do so because he's not an inspired author. That doesn't mean he's not important. That doesn't mean he hasn't done some things that are significant. I've got teachings on Tertullian that I've done myself. I mean, he's important, but he's not to be understood in equality with the biblical text. I'm saying, so if you really want to do some damage to Christianity along these lines, what you have to do is you got to go back to the biblical text. I'm saying, and the earliest believers, in order to draw whatever objection you're trying to draw. But other than that,
all right,
you haven't done any damage to Christianity whatsoever by appealing to these later traditions,
right?
And and authors that are external to the inspired text,
right? Because what we see now, this idea of December 25th for the church wasn't a matter of so much theology, but chronology.
Chronology, right?
It had nothing to do with us trying to mimic the sun god. Because if we was, it would be December 17th,
yeah,
or the 14th. Or because that were the days that if you're going to mimic, you got to pick the same days, right?
Yeah, if you're going to do it, you go
right, pick the 25th when they didn't use it, right? So, but that's what I got, bro. So if you want to,
well, yeah, I'm just gonna. I mean, actually, I've kind of made some of these points already, so I'm just gonna kind of sum it up, and
sure.
We can roll on out of here. I know that Richard Katz has some term papers to write and grade, and so we don't want to hold him. Yeah, let's go here. What we got here? So this is
Can you make it a little bigger.
Yeah. Oh, hold up. So this is where Shakka's at right here at the end of his presentation. All right. He does all this, and he doesn't connect the dots basically, right? Because actually in the part that we hadn't played yet, he later goes on to say something like, your pastor can't change the fact that, Horus was, born on winter solstice or whatever, and he just kind of leaves it at that. So it's like he kind of presents his information and leaves it open-ended as if he's, somehow, taking a jab at Christianity, but he doesn't connect the dots. All he's done is made a case for December 25th, winter solstice, and Horus's birthday all being the same day. But is that anything for Christians to be concerned about, as he seems to imply? And my answer would be no. It's like, actually, I kind of on the right there, I got Wile E. Coyote, standing in midair off of a cliff. I think that Shakka Ahmose is kind of like Wile E. Coyote in that he's presented his argument. That's like the cliff, and he just ran off of it, and he's just standing there with nothing left to stand on but these loose associations. And here's why. So let me go here for a second. All right. So basically what he's done is he said there's a trend. This is pretty much what I call Shakka's cliffhanger argument, that there was a tradition of Horus's birthday being on the actually I'll make it even more clear. In the 1st century, there was a tradition of Horus's birthday being on the winter solstice, which was December 25th. Therefore, and he kind of just leaves the blank open. And what he's hoping that the listener will do is kind of fill in the blank for him. Oh, therefore Christians were biting off Kemet and fabricated the Jesus birth story. That's what he wants us to do, is to fill in the blank. But critical thinkers, they're not going to do your work for you, right? You got to fill in the blank with evidence and reason, right? You've got to say that, okay, well, what I'm presenting to you in terms of this association between Horus and Jesus or whatever, winter solstice or whatever, the best explanation is what I've given you. I'm saying what I'm expecting you to fill in the blank with. But as I'm going to say, that we've got good reason to say that, you know what, whatever association he wants us to make isn't the best explanation as to what we're seeing here in the historical record. So I'm recommending your boy Shaka's got to take a nap, NAP. You know what I'm saying? That's my my acronym here. It's not a problem, for Christianity here. Actually, I think I kind of got off screen here. Can y'all see that?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. Yeah, it looked like he was sleeping in the video anyway. So, take a nap. You know what I mean? So for a number of different reasons, we can affirm that it's not the case. There's some sort of copycat Horus, December 25th, thing is going on when it comes to, the birth of Christ and the narrative in the scriptures. Again, Horus's birthday it's ambiguous and non-historical. I mean, we got, in the Egyptian calendar, you know what I'm saying? It's this intercalary day or epigomenal day that's shifting all throughout the year at various different points. And, obviously, in 46 BC, and in 26, you have these changes in the calendar where Rome institutes, supposedly Horus being born on that winter solstice around December 25th, 21st, whatever. Either way, the fact that we've got these shifting dates of Horus's birth is a clear indicator that it's not supposed to be treated as historical. Right. The Egyptians weren't saying that the actual date of Horus's birth shifts and changes to different parts of the year, as the years goes on, and nor are they saying that it's the case that somehow the Romans can just come along and change it later on. Obviously, they're whatever date they celebrated it on was not intended to be the actual date that Horus was born. Now you juxtapose that, with Jesus. Now, even though we aren't given a date, for when Jesus was born, it's pretty clear that the authors of the 4 Gospels, it's pretty clear, particularly in Luke, you can see that he's obviously trying to convey historical events. He's not conveying to you something that's mythological, and he doesn't intend for the information being conveyed about Jesus' birth and so on and so forth, or like the lineages mentioned, in the scriptures. They're not intended to be mythological. They're conveying something about the actual date. So already you've got a genre distinction to be made between the writings pertaining to Horus and the writings pertaining to Jesus. But I'm just going to set that aside for now. Either way, when it comes to Jesus' birthday, it's not recorded. I mean, we've established that it's clearly not, there's no good reason to anyway, doctrinally or biblically, to say they were on December 25th, obviously, right? Now, here's what's interesting about that. And I think you alluded to this earlier. This goes to my third point. Now, it's clear that Jesus' birth date was not a point of emphasis for the earliest believers. Now, when we're talking about the different people who argued as to whether it was on December 25th or whether it was January 6th or whatever, these are Christians who are coming along later down the road. Like, these are later generation Christians, like Tertullian. He's dealing with, he's writing in the 200s, or in the 4th century, you're dealing with, Christmas being situated within, on Saturnalia or whatever it was, right? So these are later centuries, right? But as far as the initial believers, those who are initially getting the gospel out, those who are establishing this Christian movement, right? Obviously, for them, the birthday of Jesus wasn't something essential to their teachings whatsoever. right? It wasn't a point of emphasis,
Right.
Because we can see in the biblical text, obviously, like for example, in the book of Revelation, you have John referring to the day of the Lord, the Lord's day, rather,
Right.
which day that they, gave homage to Christ and worship, given that he rose on, what we would call Sunday, right? So they're mentioning that, they have this date set aside to commemorate, the resurrection, but there's nothing like that when it comes to the birth of Jesus. There's no commemoration of his date of birth, right? Because his date of birth wasn't the emphasis. There's no theological weight, I'm saying, on that day in the same way that we see for the resurrection. That wasn't the emphasis of the book, right? Now here's the point. Gotta go to my next point here. I was actually just reading the way I wrote it here. It would be highly unlikely for the disciples to work so hard to concoct the whole narrative framed around Hebrew prophecy and all that, and then just throw in this Horus-driven birth story that ultimately has no theological weight and would undermine their cause. I mean, already, actually, I got this book right here. This is N.T. Wright, Resurrection of the Son of God, which is like, obviously, you see how big it is. It's a huge book. So, but I would commend it to anybody who's really interested in evidence for the resurrection or whatever. But he kind of talks about how the disciples would have had no incentive to make up the story about the resurrection. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you were going to come up with some sort of story that you wanted a fellow Jew to believe about the Messiah, you wouldn't make up a story in which he was killed by the authorities that the conquering Messiah was supposed to overthrow. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't make up things like that. And you certainly wouldn't add to that these beliefs and ideas that a first century Jew would have understood to be pagan. You're not going to throw in pagan theology, you know what I'm saying, intermingled with the, with your proclamation of the Messiah, because ultimately that's going to undermine your point, because the Pharisees certainly would have been knowledgeable about some of the competing views in their time, and they could easily shut that down. So it wouldn't make sense to add this kind of like an irrelevant point, you know what I'm saying, where you just kind of throw some Horus mythology in there for something that's really not even the emphasis of your whole, preaching message. Like knowing that would ultimately undermine what it is that you're trying to do. It just makes
real quick. Phil Fox wants to know, what is the name of that book again?
Yeah, the Resurrection of the Son of God, and it's by N.T. Wright. And I was referencing it to point out that one of the arguments that he makes in terms of the historicity of the resurrection is that the disciples would not have had an incentive to make something like that up, but given the fact that a first century Jew wouldn't have bought it. Like they would have been like, I mean, what do you mean the Messiah that's supposed to be coming and conquering everybody died? Oh, that's garbage. I'm saying, so there would have been no incentive for them to make that up. You know what I'm saying? It would be like me saying, yo, Alfredo, I got $1 million in my bank account because me and some aliens robbed a bank together, and I got $1 million. Like if I wanted you to really believe that I had $1 million, I would give you some information that seemed reasonable. You know what I'm saying? That seemed in line with the reality. With things that we know to be true. And for a first century Jew, the notion that the Messiah would have died and so forth, that wouldn't have been consistent with what they believed about the Messiah. And in the same way, if we're talking about undermining the gospel message that the disciples were supposedly preaching, it would also hamper their cause to be inserting, this pagan mythology, i.e., this Horus kind of stuff. That would also undermine the cause. So that's kind of what I was bringing that up. All right. So then lastly, we talked about this, in terms of other plausible motivations for December 25th, that tradition. These reasons weren't like copycat reasons. I mean, politically, there were some things going on where in the 4th century, Christians, obviously, they're occupying a different space in society than they were in the first couple of centuries of their existence. And so they're kind of asserting themselves in the culture in a certain way. And having a celebration on December 25th would have served those ends. And we can talk about some other reasons as well. But my whole point is, for all these reasons, Shakka hasn't given us anything to suggest that, oh, well, you know what, actually, yeah, you know what, these guys would have borrowed from, pagan myths and overlaid that with the birth of Jesus. No, actually, I think that the better explanation is that they recorded the oral history that they probably got from Mary and what have you, and they put it in the scriptures as indicative, as addressing some of the Hebrew prophecies that those things would have fulfilled, and it supported their case that Jesus was the Messiah. That's why it's in the text, not because they borrowed it from some people, from some false worshipers somewhere down the line. So I was kind of being quick with that, but I mean, I just want to kind of get that in there. Yeah.
Oh, that was great. I mean, and again, like we said from the very beginning, this is a very old zeitgeist talking point that, it's one of those zombie things that just keep walking around the internet. But to his credit, he tried to throw in an extra wrinkle by making us all take a nice trip to China real quick, So it is what it is. So again, it was his death by his own YouTube title.
Right.
This is the second time he's kind of did it to himself. You know what I mean? Because the minute,
a little too much, man. He tried to make a definitive claim that just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And again, by his early on in the clip that we played, he said straight up that, according to Plutarch, it was around December, 25th, or the winter solstice rather. So even his own source, according to what he read, isn't given a definitive date. So he's even overstepping his own source to make a claim. Right.
No, absolutely. So with that being said, Adam, is there anything else you're going to be doing before? Well, I guess this is New Year's is this Friday, right, or this Thursday?
Yeah, man. I'm gonna try to I'll probably get a short video out. I'm working on some other stuff, some lives for my channel. Be looking at some KRS-One clips and breaking some things down. So
nice.
Yeah. So I got some stuff planned, man. So y'all stay tuned. And I'm also working on a couple articles and getting back on my writing game. Because I kind of got a little out of touch with it. So I had to get my pen game back up. You know what I mean? So writing some stuff as well.
Or what? I mean, you probably get in contact with Richard Katz. I mean, he's in the chat. He could probably give you some pointers.
Yeah.
He is a professor, right? So
right.
Help you out.
To him, and
he could peer review your article actually, since he is a PhD. So
capital PhD.
Capital PhD, right?
Capital, right.
So yeah, for me, I mean, I wasn't trying to do anything until January, but my good friend decided to pop a video, so it's like it's only right that I respond because we cool like that.
Right.
So you'll see me again on these streets somewhere in January. So
man, you probably gonna be up here tomorrow, man.
Well, if someone comes at me, yeah, probably. But
hey, all right.
If they want to smoke, then that might have to happen. But oh yeah, so you got an invitation here, bro, by Mr. Phil Fox.
Oh, absolutely, man. I'd love to come through, man. Absolutely. We just gotta set a date. Let me know. Whenever you say, I'll be there. You know what I'm saying?
You just gotta promise a chicken sandwich for Adam, and he'll show up. That's what you gotta do.
Right.
That's a speaker's fee, a chicken sandwich. No, it's a peanut butter sandwich, actually, right?
Right.
Peanut butter sandwich.
D News said, "Do not ask him for spelling pointers."
It's about Richard Katz.
Oh, Richard Katz. Oh, okay. Okay.
Tyler's like, wait, Katz is here? No, Tyler, no, he wasn't here. So, but yeah, man. So any last words before we out of here, bro?
Nah, man. You know what, man? It's going into another year, and I don't know why. I'm just gonna say this. Like, I know it's been a tough one here in 2020, but I think what we need to be looking at is just all God's people, man. Be on your face before the Lord. I don't think anything necessarily magical happens when we go from, when the ball drops and we get to 2021. But, I can say that every day that we wake up, we've got another opportunity to preach the gospel and live the gospel. And I think that's where, believers ought to be, man. So keep fellowshipping with one another, keep preaching the gospel and keep living it, and then encouraging others to do the same, man.
And with that being said, that is Adam Coleman and BK Apologist. Catch you later. Peace.